Hey everyone, and welcome to another Sasquatch Theory podcast. On this episode, we have Pamela, who lives in the foothills of the Ozarks in the state of Arkansas. Pamela and her husband Paul have been experiencing Bigfoot activity on their property for many years now. Pam wanted to talk about these experiences openly here on the channel, and she's got some very interesting encounters to share with all of us. Could these creatures possibly possess abilities that go beyond human comprehension? I believe they do. Why do these creatures choose to hang out around people's houses, and why are they consistently observing humans? Do they have ulterior motives, or are they just simply interested in curious creatures? Alright, let's dive into our next Bigfoot interview from the state of Arkansas. Pamela, welcome to Sasquatch Theory. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for asking. Pamela, if you would, tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and your Bigfoot encounter and experiences from the very beginning, please.
Okay, my name is Pam. I'm 54. My husband and my husband's name is Paul. We live in northern Arkansas at the foothills of the Ozarks. And we've had a lot of activity on this property. We started hunting this property in around 2002, 2003. And I think it was the following deer season, my husband had come out and he was walking down this old logging trail, and he seen a set of 5 tracks, and they was just like one right in front of the other. And he said they were about 10 inches long. And he said you couldn't see the toes real good, but you could see, the foot. And he said it was fresh, but he couldn't figure out, what would have left it. I mean, the people that owned the property, they were an elderly couple, and, they still lived here, but they were, elderly. And so, he didn't really know what to think about it. And, I think he said he had an old flip phone at the time, and he took pictures of them. But, I don't really know whatever happened to those pictures. That was a long time ago. But, and then, back then I hunted some. Our kids were young, so I didn't get the chance to come out here a lot. But I know one of the times when I came out there where my stand was at, there was a tree, and right in front of the stand, there was a limb, and it was probably, I don't know, about the size of a soda can, maybe a little bit smaller. And it was just snapped off about 10 foot up. And, I thought, what in the world would do that? I mean, there hadn't been any storms or anything like that. And so, I showed it to Paul, and, we couldn't figure it out because we knew a buck couldn't have got up that high and done anything like that. And, that was on I think that was on a Saturday, because the next day his brother came out here and hunted with him, and he sat on a, in a different area where I was at. It was probably, maybe 100 yards apart, which I wasn't here that day. And he sat on the ground, and he said he heard a noise behind him, and he said he turned and he looked, and he seen something walking up the creek. And it was getting, late. The woods was getting kind of dark, but he could see this walking up the creek, and he thought, who in the world is that? And all he could tell is it was, looked big, and it was black. Well, he told Paul about it. Well, him and Paul had went down there a few days later, and Paul stepped off in that creek, and he could see whatever this was from like the waist up. And when Paul stepped off in there, he could only see Paul from like the very top of the shoulders up. So it was a good, probably 8 foot tall. And all he could tell, he said he couldn't see if it had a hair. He just said it was black, And they was always hearing knocks and stuff whenever they would come out here. Paul said that they had no idea as to what it was. Back then there wasn't much out about Bigfoot and things that they do, or at least, we didn't hear anything about it. And so eventually I got to where, I was coming out here more. And I went to my stand one day, and the way the land is, and my stand is right at the edge of a major power line. And I was in my stand, and then there's a fence line that runs behind my stand. It crosses the power line and runs into the corner of the tree line. And the tree line, it makes kind of like a pie shape right there. Well, there was some dogs that had ran through that little strip of trees there, and they ran up into that corner where the fence line meets the wood line. And they was rolling around and barking and everything, and I thought they might have had a deer down in that corner. So I got down and went up there to run them off. And you have to kind of walk up this little bitty, it's just like a little hill. It's just just a like 3 or 4 foot tall little hill. And as I got to the top of that hill, I thought, well, I'm going to go on up into that corner and see if there's a deer. And I could smell something that smelled really bad. And as I started approaching that corner, something from across the power line in the woods over there, and it's real thick with cedars, you can't see in there. It let out this really deep guttural growl. I mean, I've never heard anything like it. There was no way it was another dog or a coyote or a cat or a bear. There is no way. And so I just started backing out, and I backed probably almost 100 yards, and there was a creek I had to cross. And so I turned and crossed that creek, and I ran back to the truck, and I told Paul what happened. And I wouldn't hunt back over there for a little while, but then, I eventually started hunting back over there again. And then me and Paul would come out here a lot through the week, especially before deer season. And by this time, the elderly couple had moved in with their son. Their son lives in a different state. They had, both become sick, and so they asked Paul to oversee the property. And so, we would come out here a couple of times a week and, just ride around, check the camera. I think at that time we only had like one camera, and the deer feeders and stuff. And out by the edge of this power line, there was some sheet metal, some tin that I think the man's grandson had tried maybe to build a little fort or something out there at one time. And but the sheet metal was still laying there. And we drove by on the four-wheeler, and the son had been here, and he had bush hogged the field, and he had moved that sheet metal, and you could see where the where it had been laying, the grass was dead. Well, when we drove by, right in that dead grass, there was a cell phone. So Paul stopped, he picked it up, and we was looking. It was an old flip phone, and something had chewed on it. And we didn't know if it had been one of theirs, or who it belonged to. And the thing of it is, this is out in the middle of nowhere. There's nobody else that comes out here. But so he just took that phone and laid it on top of that sheet metal, and this is flat out there. And so we went on and done whatever we was going to do. And then the next day we come back out, and we always took like the same path. Well, when we come back, that phone was laying back in that dead grass. And we was like, how did that get there? So he picked it up, he put it back on the sheet metal, and we left. Well, the next day we was coming out every day that week. And the next day we come back out, and like I said, we'd always take the same path. And we went by, and the cell phone was gone, but there was a piece of pipe, like it was probably about 3 foot long piece of pipe laying in that dead grass. And so we was really like, what is going on? And so he picked up the pipe and put it on the metal. And, we done whatever it was we was doing, and we left. Well, we didn't get to come back the next day, but then the day after that, we was really curious. And so when we come back out, we hurried up and got back there, and that piece of pipe was completely gone. But there was this little white flowery button. I don't know if you've ever been in a house trailer, like an older house trailer, that on the ceiling, they would have these little flowers that they would put the screw in. It was kind of like a little decoration thing. Well, that's what it was. Where it came from, I have no clue. But it was laying there. And so by this time, me and Paul are like, what is going on? And, I had a piece of candy in my pocket, and I had my hair in a ponytail. So I took it out and laid it down there, and we put the button on that metal. And after when we come back through, the button was, never did find the button. I don't know where it went, but nothing never bothered, what I put, so, we don't know what was going on there. That was really odd. And then, there'd be times we would drive through, and to get out here, you have to drive through another major power line. There's actually two that are by this property, and they converge at the top of a hill. And we have a river that's less than a mile away from the house. And then there's also another smaller power line. And there would be lots of times when we would drive through, and we would see something in that power line, but where it was at, you couldn't really back up, because at that time there was 2 other people that lived back here, 2 other families. And we'd be afraid to back up and get rear-ended, and then it'd be too far to drive down, and the road is real narrow, to drive down and turn around and come back. But, that happened quite often, where we would see things. Paul seen something. I was with him, and we drove through, and he said, is there an old burnt out tree in that power line back there? And I said, I don't remember one. And anyways, we had went to town, and we come back, and he said whatever this was had to be 10 foot tall. But it was gone. And it was things like that we would see in these power lines. Just and there was one time we had some friends with us, and Paul, and then the lady, the woman was sitting in the back seat with me, and her husband was at front with Paul. Well, Paul and her saw something in the power line, and where he was at that point, he could kind of safely back up. So he backed up, and whatever it was gone, but they both seen it. And at that time in the power line, the bushes were probably, I would say, 6, 7, 8 foot tall. And this was above that. So whatever it was big. But then in around 2014, we purchased 40 of this 80 acres right here. And, and we're surrounded by, thousands of acres of woods, and most of it's private owned, but it's still, thousands of acres of woods around us. And then, once we started building out here, we started noticing things. My sister-in-law had found an arrowhead out in the front yard. And so I was out there, or actually she had found the arrowhead, and me and Paul were out here working on the house, and I had opened up the sliding doors in the front and was looking outside, and it was dark, but we have a yard light, and it kind of shines across the creek. We have a creek that runs across the front of our yard, and then on the other side of the creek, there's cedar trees. Well, I was standing there and I thought I seen something run in between those 2 trees, and I told Paul, I I just seen something. I said, whatever it was big. Well, a couple of nights later, or it was in the evening, I was out in the yard. I was gonna look, see if I could find any more arrowheads, and I came up on 2 tracks, and when I say it was 2 tracks, there was one small one and one bigger one. The bigger one was a little bit more washed out, but the small one, you could see toes and everything, but it was just one. Um, I don't understand that, how you just one track. But the small one was about 4 foot away from the bigger one. And then we come out here one day to work, and on the sliding doors, which we have like a 2-foot footer on the house, it's a concrete floor, and then the sliding doors. So you're talking, you know, from the ground to the top of the sliding door, at least 8-9 feet. I don't know. Um, and we come in, and I looked over at the sliding door, and I thought, what is that on the sliding door? So I walked out the side door and walked around, and there were 2 huge handprints, and all you could see was like, um, I wasn't like the whole hand. It looked like somebody had put their hands up there and was trying to look in the house. And all you could see was, part of the hand and like probably 3 to 4 of the fingers and part of the thumb. It wasn't just like a whole handprint. And they were huge, and they were at the top of the door. And I showed it to Paul, and he was like, well, maybe one of the family came out. And I said, I don't think they could reach up there. And I said, besides, look how big they are. And so I got the window cleaner, went out there, and as I was trying to clean it, it would just smear. It was real oily. Um, and by this time, he and I, after finding the footprints, and, we were suspecting pretty good as to what it could possibly be, but, it's still really hard to wrap your mind around. And then, once we got moved in, we would hear things like shaking trees out back, and breaking limbs, and like, because in the house, we didn't have good phone service. And so to send a text or talk on the phone, a lot of times you'd have to go outside. And and when we go outside, that's when you'd hear this stuff going on. We finally had to get a cell phone booster installed so we could have phone service. But we would hear all this stuff going on, behind it. Usually it came from behind the house. I know one night I went out to send a text, and I mean, I could hear something that was like smack, and then this tree cracked, and it just boom down on the ground. And I turned around and ran back in the house. I told Paul, there's something behind the house. And but it was just stuff like that going on. And then one day I went hunting, and this was something else that would happen even before we moved out here. I would be sitting in my stand, and I would hear this like loud thump behind my stand, in the woods back there. And I'd be like, what is making it? It would sound like if you were to take like a heavy sandbag or something and drop it from, like 15 foot. It would just thump real loud on the ground. And I would hear that a lot. Well, this particular morning, this was after we moved out here. I was sitting there and I was hearing that. And then I heard a tree go over. And then a little bit later, I heard another tree go over. And so when we met back at the house for lunch, I was telling Paul, I said, there's some crazy stuff going on back there. I said, I'm hearing some really weird stuff. And so he came and sat with me that evening, and we was sitting there, and I mean, it was as calm as could be, no wind. And we hadn't been there probably 5-10 minutes at the most. And there went another one. I mean, that was 3 trees in one day. It's just stuff like that, going on quite often. We never had anything approach the house except for the handprints on the windows, but at this point, we had never had anything like slapping the house or anything like that. And then one day, Paul and I, we was coming home from church, and used to we would have to drive through that creek to get to our driveway. And now, we drive over it, we put in horns and stuff. So, but back then we still had to drive through it. And at this time, there was just us, and then there was another couple that lived back here that we share this same road, this same driveway, that leads to their driveway and then our driveway. Well, we was in that creek, and Paul stopped, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "What is that?" And I was looking, and I looked down the creek, and you could see probably it was an arm. It's probably about 3.5, or yeah, about 3.5 foot long of what we could see of it. It was solid black. It was about the size of a soccer ball. And it was just splashing the water, back and forth. It was splashing the water 3 to 4 foot up in the air. And you could see the sun like shining off of the wet hair. And we were both looking at it. And then the lady, from the other driveway, she was pulling out of her gate, and we was blocking her. So we had to pull up and pull into our driveway so she could get out. And, we didn't go back. Paul was, trying to make sense of it as to what it was. Like I said, your mind does not want to comprehend, what you're seeing. And about 2 days later, he said, because, I kept saying that was an arm, and he was like, "I don't know what it was," And then about 2 days later, he was like, "Pam," he said, "that was an arm." He said, "There ain't no doubt about it. That was an arm." And so we went back down there, and where we could see this arm, there was like a little bend in the creek there, and I think it was like a little tree that was sticking out. But right around that little bend, there was like a deep hole where something could have been sitting, and we couldn't have seen it because of the little bend. And but it was a deep hole, and we was kind of thinking maybe it was sitting there cooling off or something. I don't know. But and then even seeing that, your mind, you're still in denial. um and but anyways, we seen that. And then this was in June of 2021. I have a swimming pool. And this right here is what it gets hard for me to talk about. Okay.
No, you're fine. Take your time.
Yeah, it's okay. I have a swimming pool, and it was in June. It started on the Monday, I think was on the 14th. And I was out there. I was had cleaned it and was just kind of floating around. And I looked down, and we had this little it's like we have like a little field, and then there was some cedar trees on both sides of this path, and then it opened back up into another little field. And I was laying on the mat, and I looked down there, and I could see something reddish brown down there, and I'm like, "What is that?" And I didn't see it move. And now before that, I was hearing like this weird whistle, and it had started from across the power line. And then I heard again, it was in these woods where I was seeing, whatever it was I was looking at. And so I laid there, and I was watching it, and I watched it for several minutes, and, I never seen it move. And so I thought, well, I'm going to float over and get a drink. And at this time, I didn't have a deck or anything on the pool. All I had was the pool ladder, and I had a little shelf Paul had built that I could hang on the side of the pool. So I floated over and got a drink, and when I floated back, it was gone. I was thinking maybe it was like a broken, like a tree limb or something that had turned brown, but, it was gone. And that night, or that evening, Paul and I was sitting out front, and we heard a knock coming from that area. And then Wednesday night, he and I sat back out front, and we heard a knock again. And then from the other side of the house, um, we heard it was like this really deep, rough sneeze, is what it sounded like. And so Paul got up and walked over to the other side of the house, but it was too dark in the woods. You couldn't see anything. Well, the next day, um, I had to get back out there and clean the pool. And anyways, I walked out of the house, and as I was walking out, I heard a grunt come from the woods behind the house, and I looked up there and I didn't see anything, and it was a really deep grunt. It would kind of remind you of a buck grunt, but it was still different, and it was deeper. And so you have to walk down these concrete steps to get down to the ground, and to the yard. And so I walked on down the steps and went and put my stuff on the thing, and I got in the pool, and I heard that grunt again. And I was looking around, and I was already on edge. And then I went to clean in the pool, and um, I heard it sounded like metal hitting metal. And Paul has a bunch of metal pipes and stuff that is back there by that little field that he uses for welding projects and stuff. And it sounded like metal hitting metal. And then I heard sounded like either like a limb breaking and crashing, or it was just a loud break and crash. And this was over a period of time. It wasn't like one right after the other. But anyways, so I was hearing all this stuff, and I was almost done. I thought, well, I'm gonna make one more swipe back around the top, and I'm gonna get out. Okay. And then before I tell the rest of this, I believe 100%, I'm sorry, in guardian angels. Mine, I've heard mine speak to me before, and she saved my life. She saved me from being in a terrible car wreck with my kids in there with me. And I've heard her speak to me 3 times, or actually 4, counting this time. And each time, it saved my life. And so as I was making that last round on the pool, I looked up, and about 40 yards away from me, and 20 yards being like the yard and the driveway, and then the other 20 up into the edge of the woods, that reddish brown Sasquatch was standing there. And this was so crazy, because it looked like it had taken its hair and pulled it over its face. I could not see the face. And it was a reddish brown. It was I could see the pec muscles, in the chest, and and its head, its shoulders went straight out. It didn't like have a slope or a slant to the shoulders. They just went straight out, and this thing had to be every bit of 4 foot wide at the shoulders. And it was standing there, and it had like the hair hanging off the arms. It had its arms kind of bowed. And there was the hair hanging off was about 6 inches long, and I could see it blowing in the wind. And the thigh muscles on this thing were massive. I could see the right side of it really good, because the sun was hitting it on that side. But anyways, when I looked up and I seen this thing, my angel told me, she said, "Don't look at it." So I just I looked right back down into the water, and trying to act like I didn't even see it. And I was about 15 foot from the ladder. And so I went to walk towards the ladder, and I was glancing up, and we have a carport beside the pool, and the top of it kind of comes down over the sides a little bit. And as I was looking up, I couldn't see it because of the top of the carport. And I didn't know if it was coming towards me. I didn't know where it was at. And I was trying to look. I I just remember thinking, I'm gonna die. That's what was going through my mind. Um, and I was kind of backing up, trying to look. I couldn't see it. So I turned towards the ladder, and Miguel, that's the last thing I remember. I don't remember getting out of my pool. I don't remember grabbing my stuff. The next thing I remember, I was standing on those concrete steps, and I was looking around, and it was like I was in a fog. It was the craziest thing. And I remember I was scanning, looking for this thing. Um, and it was almost like the way I felt was like when you come out of anesthesia, that weird, uh, groggy, I don't even know how to explain it, but it almost like you're not even yourself. And that's how I felt. And I just remember scanning, and I went up the steps and ran into the house. And the best that I can kinda figure, because I always tried to plan it out to where, uh, whenever I would have to get out there and clean the pool, that I could do it and get back in and get rinsed off and then come down and get supper started before Paul gets home. Well, when I came, because I came in, and I can remember, I hopped in the shower to wash off, and I'm thinking, "What just happened? What just happened?" Your mind is just going 100 mile an hour. And, I remember when I came down the stairs, Paul was walking through the door, and I remember thinking, "Why is he home so early?" But it wasn't he early. Um, and so the best of that I can kinda calculate, there's 30 to 45 minutes that I can't account for. Um, and, it's just it's really hard to, it took me a while to come to grips with it. And then, uh, we had, uh we had told our story on Bigfoot Odyssey before. That was in that August of that year. And then, Paul, um um, every October, he goes bear hunting, and I remember and this was something else weird that happened. Um, I was still dealing with this encounter. It's so hard to wrap your mind around seeing one of these things. Um, and, Paul had went to bed, and I was still downstairs, and I was, uh, looking at something on my phone. And the whole front of our house is glass. We have 2 sets of sliding doors, and then on each side of the sliding door, we have another window that's the same size. And then above those, there's 4 more windows, square or rectangle, and then 2 more triangle beside those, and then 2 more triangle at the top. Well, I was sitting there, and out of the corner of my eye, I seen a light go by the little triangle window, and I glanced up, and then it was coming across one of the big rectangle windows, and I'm like, "Wow, that's a huge comet." And then this thing went in front of the window, and it just stopped, and it was about the size, it wasn't as big as a softball, but it was a little bit bigger than a baseball. And this thing had a tail on it. I mean, it was like a round ball, and then all of a sudden it started sloping off into this pointed tail. And it just stopped. And then I could see that it was reflecting into the house onto the ceiling. And then all of a sudden this thing spun. The whole ball just spun and the tail just whipped and it shot off like a streak of lightning. And then now I'm thinking, what the world, you know? Um, and we caught something on game camera that I can't explain. It's a bright light, and where it's at, there is no light source. Um, but then the next year in 2022, Kerry Arnold came out here, and he captured. There was a lot of things that went on when he was here, which of course, he lived in Mississippi and he worked in Texas, and uh, whenever he would go to work, he would take his stuff that he was working on with him so he could, when his free time, work on it there. And he was hit head on, and everything that he captured out here was destroyed. So, but he had there was, he captured lights out here. He filmed them. There was just all kinds of stuff. The knocks. He heard whoops out here. I had never heard whoops, and me and him both heard them. Paul had had to go to the store, and me and Carrie was here, and the other guy that was with him was in the shower, and I was in the house, and Carrie was out there at his truck eating lunch, and he texted me and he said they're yelling. And when I walked out the door, I could hear some type of vocal, and then there was the two perfect whoops, and then some other kind of howl. But anyways, but I also seen them, a gray one, after they had left. I was sitting out front. Paul was out mowing the other property. Anyways, Paul was out mowing the other property, and I was out here by myself. And I actually heard that it was like a metal sound again. And I looked over, and almost in the same area where I had seen the reddish brown one, there was this one was like an ash gray color, and it was getting late in the evening. But when I looked over, I could see the head, the shoulders, and the arms. And then all of a sudden, this thing just dropped like it was on an elevator, but super fast. And I was like, you are kidding me. And I got up and I walked to the end of my car, but I couldn't see anything. And then when Paul got home and I told him, he went out there and he took a flashlight and he looked around, and he saw it looked like a track, but there's so much leaf litter, it's hard to tell, like detail, but there was definitely an impression there. And then another time, I think I saw that reddish brown one again across the field. I was back in the pool cleaning it, and I was the hose was hung, and I turned to see what it was hanging on, and as I turned across the field, there's we have the yard and then a creek and then a little small field, and it's probably 150 yards maybe to the tree line over there. And as I turned, I seen something. It was a big reddish brown, and it was like how you have to do it to double take. I looked, I caught it out of my eye, and I was already in the process of turning back. And when I turned back to look, it was gone. But I could definitely see it was big. It was, the shoulder, and it was sticking out of these bushes looking. And, but the main encounter was that one in 2021. And, and since then we've had, several different things. Like now, at times there's stuff that hits the house, And we don't have any trees that's close enough to where anything could be hitting the house, you know. I was taking a shower one night, and I was hearing something, and I thought, what am I hearing? So I kind of stopped, and then I heard it. There's something pecking on my bathroom window. And I shut off the water, and, you know, I mean, I never heard it again. Well, after I got out and I had walked into the bedroom, I thought I heard it again when I was in the bedroom. But, and then, like, we've had things like Paul, he killed a deer last year, and he had, you know, left the gut pile um, down the woods, and that was probably around 10 or 10:30. And he and his brother were hunting, and they decided to go over to a different spot to look around. But when they come back through just a couple hours later, that whole entire gut pile was completely gone. He said there was nothing. He said all you could see was just a little wet area, you know, but if it would have been buzzards or coyotes or anything, it would have been scattered. It was completely gone. Um, and when I hunt, I still hear things. I've had knocks, and I mean, it's just the ongoing, process of things. And like Paul, he went down. Like I said, we're less than a mile away from the river, and there's some people that in another state that own that property. Well, they gave Paul permission to go back there, you know, and he could fish and he can hunt as long as if they asked Paul if he would keep the driveway maintained. And so he went back there one day. He had set out some it was like limb lines, but they were just coming off the bank. And he went down there and was checking that, and a rock came flying over and landed in the water. And, we have found like what looked like it's a little igloo type nest. Paul stumbled upon it one day, and it was big enough that he could crawl in and sit down and still have plenty of room. And then, and I've got pictures of that, but part of a tree has now fallen on it and smashed that. But I do have pictures of that. But it's just, ongoing activity now. Like I said, just strange things. I put out an audio recorder. I've caught, howls and whoops, and, it's just ongoing. And that's pretty much it as far as that I can. There's so much. I'd be here if I went into every little detail. I'd be here for a couple hours probably. But that's just kind of the gist of everything.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you for sharing that with me. And you said there's still ongoing activity. How often does this happen? Like every other day, every 2 weeks? What would you say?
Well, like when I'm hunting, I went hunting the other day and I didn't hear anything. But most of the time when I'm outside, there's usually something, you'll hear a knock or trees going over. And there at one point, it was so bad. When I would come home from work, as soon as I would get out of the car, I'd hear a knock. I mean, if I walked out the front door, be a knock. And it was almost like, I mean, that never really happened with Paul. Oh, and we have found rocks, rock stacks. We had one left out here after we had a wedding out here. And then we found rocks left on our granddaughter's trampoline. And what's weird about those rocks is there's one rock that keeps getting moved. it'll be stood straight up, and then it'll, and which, if the wind gets to blow in the trampoline because it's sitting on the edge, um, I guess it could knock it back over. But I mean, the rock stands, something will stand that rock straight up. And that's happened a couple times. Now, I don't do knocks out here. I don't interact with them. I'm afraid to. We don't do knocks or whoops, and I don't leave things or anything like that for them. But they try to interact with us. We found a little rock one time out front. It was a piece of mortar is what it is, and it's got different colored speckled pieces of paint, like, on it. And it was in between mine and Paul's chair. And I just happened to look down, and I picked up, I said, "What's this?" And he said, "That's mortar." He said, "We don't even have mortar on the property." And so I set it out here on the ledge on the edge of the house, and it stayed there for a long time. And then one day I noticed it was gone, and I asked Paul, I said, "Did you move that rock?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, it's gone." And then it stayed gone for months. And then when Carrie Arnold was out here, uh, he was sitting. We had the two chairs out there, but we had got a glider swing, and we put it in between the two chairs. And he was sitting in that glider swing, and Paul walked up, and there laid that rock. And he picked it up, and he was, telling Carrie about it. Well, then we put it back out there, and then it disappeared again. And I don't, I asked Paul, I said, "Did you move that rock again?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, it's gone again." And then at that time, I had been talking with a guy, a Bigfoot researcher, and he was saying, "You need to go out there and tell him you want your rock back." And I'm like, "I don't think I want to interact with them." I said, it scares me. And he's like, "Well, just say, I want my rock back." So I listened to him. And I went out there, and Paul was out there, and I told Paul what I was going to do. And so I just said, "I'd really like to have my rock back." I said it kind of loud. Well, then the next day I was coming up the driveway, and something told me to look down. It literally said, "Look down." And I looked down, and there lay that rock. And I was like, "You are kidding me." And so the mind speak thing, I don't know if that's what that was, but I don't want no part of that. That was, I don't want something getting in my head like that.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Did you keep any of the rocks that you found?
Yeah, the ones that was stacked out there on those steps after the wedding, they're still out there. And then that little piece of mortar, it's still out there. But like I said, it has disappeared and come back and disappeared and come back. And as far as I can tell, nothing has ever messed with the other ones, but they were literally stacked on top of each other.
Yeah. You'll have to
And
take a photo of that and send it over to me. I'd like to check it out.
the
The rock pile.
the well, I mean, they fell down. Because they were right there on the edge of the steps. And my daughter, she was getting ready to leave. We'd had the wedding out here, and she was getting ready to leave, and I was going to turn to walk down those steps. And out of the corner of my eye, I just thought it was one rock, I mean, because it all kind of blended. And I was going to kick it. And as I went to kick it, I realized they were stacked, but I had already kicked them and knocked them over. And I asked her, I said, "Did you see those rocks?" And she said, no, she didn't notice them. I said, "They were stacked on top of each other." And I tried to restack them like I can visualize now, but I can't get on the stack because they're just random rocks. They weren't smooth rocks or, but as I kick myself now every time I think back, because I just remember I was turning to go down the steps, and I just caught rocks, and I didn't even realize they were stacked until my foot was already in motion to move it. And I'm like, "Oh, they're stacked." And then, I couldn't even stop my foot.
Mm.
Um,
No, that's fine. I'm
but
just more interested in seeing like what type of rock it is and the size and just kind of what
okay,
they look like.
yeah, okay. I can, and I may have pictures, but if not, I can get some and send those to you.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that's fine. It sounds like with the activity that you're experiencing, maybe they're out there messing with you more than your husband, and you probably get the consistent feeling of being watched. Is that correct?
oh, all the time. I mean, and that's the thing is, I've always been one of those people that can kind of sense things. Um, and when we first started hunting out here, I would always tell Paul, there's something different. I said, that place out there gives me the creeps, you know. And I never could get used to the feeling. Um, and I still have the feeling. I've just grown accustomed to it, I guess. Um, but it's definitely, um, you know, I feel like it all the time. But
Yeah. And why do you think they're hanging out around the house?
I think that I think they actually stayed in here because before we, bought the property, um, it was right in here where we built our house. It was so thick. I mean, there was trees and cedar trees and thorn thickets, and it was so thick in spots you couldn't even really get through it. And we found like a whole bunch of bones, deer bones and stuff out here. I mean a bunch. And, we was thinking coyotes because the people that owned it did not let anybody else hunt here. And for somebody, because somebody had mentioned, well, maybe somebody was dumping their deer off, their carcasses. And I said, the nearest person is a mile away, you know. And, we had never seen anybody out here, you know. Um, but, and when I say bones, I mean, it was a lot of bones. Um, But I think this was like a corridor because it's, in between 2 big hills. We're, like, in the valley, and, I mean, you got a creek that goes to the river's less than a half a mile away, and then you got a power line, like, um, probably 175 yards away from the house, and one of the main power lines. Um, and I think that they just, kinda hung out in here. That's what, me and Paul have kinda wondered.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I theorize that they're using the power line strips to navigate through the forest in that area. And makes me wonder why they stick close to the power line strips. Maybe it's like a visual, like they see it and they know where they're at.
Mhm. Yeah, and, and it could be just a easier walk, instead of, going through the woods, I don't know. But it may be a good because I know I see a lot of deer crossing the power line. It may be they hunt the power lines too,
Yeah, it could be an ambush
but
area.
yeah, but,
And your husband, his brother, had this encounter by the creek whenever it was getting dark. Did he have any experiences prior to that encounter?
no, and he wouldn't even for the longest time, even now when I talk to him about it, he's like, "I can't say that it was a Bigfoot." He said, "All I know is it was black, solid black, and it was big." But he didn't even realize how big until they done the size comparison, you know? And, I think he believes because he knows that I wouldn't lie, but he has a hard time saying that it was a Bigfoot, you know?
Yeah, he's not sure what he's seen, and he can't say for
Yeah,
sure what it was and what it wasn't. Whenever you were
yeah.
hunting and you heard that loud growl, what can you compare that to?
Oh, I've actually never heard anything like it. I listened to, like, big cat growls, you know, and like a lion or a tiger, um, and it wasn't even because this was way too deep. It was just the deepest guttural growl that I have ever heard, and there's really nothing I can compare it to it because I've never heard anything that sounds close to it. I've listened to everything that, and especially anything that would be here. We have the occasional bear here, but I have never seen one. Mountain lions, coyotes, dogs, pigs. But I mean, this this doesn't even compare to what those would make. Because it was, I've heard people say that when they hear like the Sasquatch sounds that they can feel it. Now, I didn't feel it in me, like in my chest or anything like that, but it was so deep. It literally felt like the whole growl just surrounded me. I could tell where it came from, the general area, but it was like amplified or something. I don't know. It was crazy.
Yeah. No, that's a good description. You can't compare it to anything. And, a lot of people mention that when they hear a Sasquatch vocalize. And whenever you guys found that flip phone and the pipe that was left in the area, it sounds like there was like a gifting situation going on there. Do you get that feeling?
That's what we, because around about that time was when Finding Bigfoot was coming out, and we had watched some of that, and that's where we learned. I think it was on there that they do like the gifting, and me and him was like, really, because and we thought, could that be possible? I mean, but and so I mean now I think that's what was going on, you know, but back then we really didn't, really know because there just wasn't a lot of information at that time, you know.
Yeah. It could be them testing you to see like if you noticed a difference on the property. Like, are these people really paying attention? If I move this, are they going to notice it?
Yeah. Well, and there was one time I was out there taking pictures. I like taking pictures, and Paul and his brothers were up here. They were building the shop, and I was out by the edge of the power line, and there's a wild plum tree out there, and it has really pretty blooms during the spring. And I was out there, and and this wouldn't have been too far from where this gifting scenario took place. And I was, taking pictures, and all of a sudden I hear, "Hey!" And I stopped, and it came from across the power line in the woods behind my stand. And I looked over there, there wasn't nobody over there. I mean, it's woods, but I mean, I could see up in there. And so I thought, well, maybe it was just one of the guys, and it echoed. So I, was walking around the tree and hear it again. Hey. And I'm like, what in the world? Because I thought it's coming from over there. And so I, continued around the tree looking at the flowers, taking pictures, and I heard it a third time. And after I heard it the third time, I just turned around and walked back to to the shop up here, and I asked them, I said, "Well, you're all yelling, hey?" And they was like, "No." And and so now I wonder, I mean, I've heard people say that they can sometimes make, say stuff, do things like that, like say a person's name or whatever. And but that was very strange to me. Because the way it sounded didn't sound really so much like a person saying, "Hey," it wasn't that clear, you know. And now I wonder, because
Yeah,
like I said,
I heard they often mimic people. Well, not often, but a lot of
yeah.
researchers have claimed that, and I've heard that from several of my guests in the past. And it gets to the point to where they even say the person's name.
Yeah. Oh, I hope I don't ever hear that. Oh, Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said earlier that Paul seen something in the power line strip whenever you guys were driving through there, and he had to back up. What exactly did he see?
Um, well, are you talking about what him and the lady that was with us both saw, or
Yeah.
there was, Well, they said it looked like a head, like, like something's head that was sticking out of all this brush, he said you could tell it was something standing there, you know, and, I don't think he could see the shoulders or anything. Like I said, the bushes were, um, probably about 7 to 8 foot tall, but, he said he could see the head, and I think he said that maybe, he could see a little bit of what looked like a shoulder, but, he couldn't tell a lot of detail because the brush was too high, and that's exactly what she saw, you know? Um, and, I've even seen things in that power line, and, I was headed out to work and looked up and I seen something and I thought, "Oh my gosh," I could see head, shoulders, but when you get to this certain spot, you're on a hill, and it's just a dangerous place to try to back up because if back then, like I said, there was 2 different families that lived back here. Now it's just us and the other family. But, it's just a dangerous place to back up because if they are coming in behind you, they'd rear end you, and the nearest place to turn around, is several hundred yards on down the road, and then you have to go down and turn around and then drive back, and then when you drive back, the way the power line's angled, you can't really see, so you'd have to drive all the way back down. I mean, it's kind of a complicated thing to try to do, and, but when I come back through, whatever I saw, it was gone. There was nothing there.
Yeah, that is
And
interesting. So you found tracks and you've heard trees shaking, limbs breaking,
mhm,
and then you had this encounter whenever you were in the pool. Can you describe what the figure looked like? I know you said it was a brown reddish color and its hair was
mhm,
in front of its face, but
mhm,
about how tall do you think it was, and can you describe any more features on the creature?
mhm. Um, well, initially, I would always say probably about 7.5 foot tall, but I seen a cutout of one done on an 8 foot sheet of plywood and a guy standing in front of it. And when Paul went out there when after he got home that day and we went out there and I was trying to envision this thing and him standing, it would have been like that guy in front of that piece of plywood. So it was every bit of probably 8 foot tall. And it had to be 4 foot wide at the shoulders because it would double my husband easy. And and like I said, the shoulders just went straight out. And then they had these big shoulder muscles. I could see the muscles and I could not see any skin. People have asked me and I'm like, I don't remember any skin. The only skin that I can say that I remember seeing is I could see this creature's hand and it was black. And like I said, the hair was pulled, or I say pulled. It looked like it intentionally pulled the hair in front of its face. It didn't want me to see its face for some reason. And it looked and, the hair and stuff on it, it was well groomed. It wasn't matted or dirty. It looked very well groomed. And as far as being able to tell how long the hair was, like on the chest, um, I can't really say how long it was. All I know is it laid flat enough on it to where I could see the pec muscles, you know, and, um, and it was kinda tapered at the waist, um, but I could see the right thigh really good. The left leg, I could not see it as well. There was, some bushes and stuff, um, but I remember seeing the right thigh. I could see it all the way down to the calf, and the calf and the thigh was huge. I just cannot imagine. I mean, to think of how big these things are, it just blows your mind. Um, but as far as that's about all the detail is because I couldn't see any of the face. Um,
Yeah.
why it done that, I don't know. I mean, you know, The feeling I got, for some reason, it didn't want me to see its face. And I don't understand that.
Yeah, and you mentioned that your guardian angel told you not to look at it. What do you think would have happened if you would have looked at the Sasquatch directly in its face?
I think if I would have looked at it and it known that I knew it was there, I think it was coming down there. That's what I believe. But I think on that day, I feel like the good Lord stepped in and saved my life, because the only time I've ever heard her is when there's danger. And I believe 100% I was in danger. I think it was going to come down there and do what? I don't know. Take me, kill me. I don't know. But, and that's just what I believe. That's what I feel. And, and like I said, I've heard her speak to me. That made the 4th time in my life.
Yeah.
And
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other 3 times, each time it saved my life or my kids.
Yes.
Or,
So it's been the same voice every time?
Yes, same. It's a female, same voice.
Okay.
And
you mentioned that you don't remember what happened after this encounter, and you mentioned it was kind of like waking up from an anesthesia. Do you think that this creature maybe produced like infrasound and like stunned you, perhaps, or there was like missing time involved? Well, definitely missing time, but do you think the creature caused that?
At first, that's what I wondered. But then we was at church one day and the pastor was talking about at times when there was the glory of God, there would be like a fog or a smoke. And it just clicked in my head, because when I remember, when I was able to remember, it was like I was in a fog. And so, now, I think, well, was that the glory of God stepping in and stopping something bad from happening? So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really know the answer, because at first I thought maybe it was from it. But, now I wonder if it was truly God stepping in and stopping something, and it was something I shouldn't see. I don't know.
Yeah, it very well could have been. And there, God's constantly watching out over us, and a lot of times we don't realize when he's saving us from danger. And sometimes, we have to put a little extra work to realize, that he's trying to protect us, and we have to be aware of those signs.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, I pray every day for protection from God for me and my family. And, and that's why I truly 100% believe the good Lord saved my life that day. And, it's very emotional for me in both ways, because reliving it and the fear, but also the spiritual part, it really, that gets me as well, and when I say the spiritual, I mean like God's protection,
Yeah, no doubt. Such a profound experience can definitely change you and, rattle you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so after this encounter, you talked about seeing this light in front of the window, and it passed by the window and kind of stopped, correct? What color was this ball of light?
It was a really bright pearly white, and it was like sparkling like a star, you know. And it, like I said, it had this tail on it, and it looked like it would like a comet. That's what it looked like, was a comet. You know how the comet has the tapered tail. It's big up by the round part, and then it tapers off. That's exactly what it looked like. And then now Paul, he's seen something outside the window as well, and it just disappeared. It was a light. It was a white light.
Yeah, that's
um,
interesting. And what was your impression whenever you saw this ball of light? What do you think it was? What does your gut tell you?
uh, really and truly, when I seen it and the way it acted, it was like it had intelligence, because I literally felt like it stopped, and it was like, "Oh, no, she sees me," and it spun and just shot out. That's exactly what I felt. I didn't feel evil. It scared me. I mean, I started crying because I mean, just a couple of months prior to this, I'd seen a Sasquatch, and just trying to wrap your mind around everything going on. Um, but I didn't feel evil, but I don't know, but that's what I literally felt, though, is it was like slowing down, like it was looking in. This is my impression, was this thing was slowing down to look in, and it was, and the feeling I got was like, "Oh, no, she sees me," and it just flips and, spun around and turned and shot off. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff out there that we don't understand. And it seems like it's a battle between good and evil, and there's a war
yeah,
being waged for our souls. And,
yep,
you know, maybe that's what's going on. It's a battle between light and darkness.
yeah. Well, it's definitely a battle every day, you know, and, like I said, Kerry, he filmed this in the power line, and that was crazy because he was already over there, and me and Paul had come over. They went over first, and then, me and Paul came over a few minutes behind them, and I think Paul had to come back to the shop for something, and, he let me off of the side by side, and I walked around this big cedar tree out there, and Kerry was standing there, and he said, "Did you see that?" And I had just caught a glimpse of a big bright light, and I was like, "Yeah, what was that?" And he said, "I don't know." He said, "It started across the top." He said, "It was like an amber color." He said, "And then it would turn to this bluish white." He said, "It just shot across." Well, then all of a sudden, this thing came back out of the woods and started coming back down the power line, and, Kerry said he's seen this thing loop, and it may have, um, but, uh but it was fast, and it was blinking like a lightning bug, but this thing was super bright, super big, and super fast. But it would blink on and then off, but when that thing would blink on, it would literally light up the like, all the grass and stuff in the power line, the bushes, and it came down and come across, and then it shot back across, and when it shot back across and went into the woods, you could see into the woods. It was lighting up the woods that bright. And, like I said, he had all this on camera, you know? Um,
Yeah, so
but,
Carrie Arnold from Bigfoot Odyssey actually filmed that light.
yes. Yes, he did. And he talked about it on his channel, you know, um, because he had already done a documentary before he came here, and, so he had 2 to work on, and, apparently the first one that they had went to, they had some camera malfunction, so he told me and Paul, he said, "I'm gonna do y'all's first, and so that way we can go back to Donnie's and redo some stuff there." And, so he was, you know, in the process of getting started on ours, and, you know, and then the accident happened, so but, that was just a terrible, terrible tragedy, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely was. And you mentioned seeing a gray creature, like an ash gray color, and it dropped down
Mhm.
super fast. Can you describe
Yeah.
what this creature looked like?
Well, it was getting, I could still see pretty good, it wasn't dark, but it was, how, like, in the evening when it's starting to get dusky dark, you can still see pretty good, but, like, into the woods, it's darker. And I just happened to look over and I could see, like, the head and the shoulders. I could see the arms. I couldn't make out any facial, detail. Um, and it was like a ash gray color, and what was weird is I think it had to have been squatted or something because, it wasn't as big as the reddish brown one, like, not near as wide, but it was, wider than, an average man. But the width of the shoulders didn't match the height because it was only about maybe 5 foot tall, and that's why I think it was squatted down, and when I looked over and seen it, it just shoo I mean, it was fast, but it wasn't like I caught a glimpse of it. I literally made direct contact and looking at it, but as far as any facial details or nothing, I can't tell you, anything about that. It was just I seen it and then it just went down, you know? Um, now there was one day Paul was sitting out front, and we have, like, a little shooting range thing out here, but before we put it up, we had, it was like a big dirt pile, and he was sitting there, and he just happened to glance over at the dirt pile, and he it was one of them, like, where you have to do a double take. And he looked over and then he kinda looked back across the creek and he was like and then he looked back over, but he could see the face of one. He said he has seen one on TV that looks a lot like what he saw. Um, I think it was, kinda similar to, um well, he said it had big eyes. Remember how I think you said you saw a little one and it had really big eyes?
Hmm.
I think, he said that this thing had big eyes, but it was like I think he said it was a reddish color. Was it a reddish color? And, he said it was small. He said it wasn't big, and it had, a lot of hair. Um, but he said it was there 1 second and then gone the next. But he said he got, a view of the face, but it was one of them things where, like I said, it's there 1 second and gone the next, and so it wasn't like he got to get a good look at it. And he was like, "I don't even," he's like, "Maybe it was something else," I'm like, "Well, what else could it have been?" He's like, "I don't know." He didn't really wanna it's hard to wrap your mind around, you know, all of it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned hearing this metal banging sound on the property. What do you think that is?
I don't know. Um, I've heard it twice, and then the 2 times, then I see a Bigfoot. Is it related? I don't know. Because I wondered maybe if it, was, like, bump in the middle to just, like, get my attention. But then I heard on, David Plottis, the 411 The Hunted, that one of the men went missing, and his friend said he heard, like, a metal sound, so I don't know. I don't know if it could be related. Um, it's just kinda odd, you know?
Yeah, I've heard that
But
around here whenever I was having Bigfoot activity. And
mhm.
also the thumping sound that you're talking about, like somebody picked up a big
Yes.
giant sandbag and dropped it on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that
I
you were
hear
hearing trees getting pushed over, I mean that screams out Bigfoot to me.
well, like like the sandbag, thing, um, I even hear that even now sometimes, and not as much as I used to. Um, and then me and Paul went back on the river one day, was just looking around on those people's property, and, we heard that same sound come from up the hill, and there's nobody up there, And I looked at him, I said, "Did you hear that?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "That's what I hear behind my stand." And then I heard a guy tell his encounter one time, and his name is Donnie Miller. um, and he said that he had a Bigfoot come up behind him, and he said when he turned around, he was hearing this thump, loud thumping, and he described it just how would describe it, like a sandbag. And he said when he turned around, he said it was stomping its foot. That's what he was hearing. Um, but so it makes me wonder if that's what they're doing, is they're stomping their foot or hitting the ground with their fist, or you know.
Yeah, that's a great theory. It could be them ground stomping or slapping the ground with their hand, or possibly jumping out of the trees and landing on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard somebody say that too, something about one jumped out of a tree. Well, I think it was that girl that you interviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she saw the creature jump out of the cedar tree, and that's the sound that she described. So it very well could be that.
Yeah, could be that. Which I know, and Donnie had said that it was, it could be a combination of any of it. When they, because as strong as they are, when they hit something, it's gonna, send some vibration.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And after learning about these creatures and hearing other people's testimonies, what do you think they are?
I kind of lean more towards, I try to find stuff from the Bible. I just kind of wonder if they are part of, the Nephilim, the fallen angels. I'm not saying that they're directly them, but like a offspring or a descendant. And because I know there was giants even after the flood. The Bible speaks of men that had lion-like faces. There was weird things the Bible talks about. And I don't know, it just makes me wonder if it's something to do with that. I don't know. It seems like there's more to them than just flesh and blood. Now, I believe they're flesh and blood, but I think there's something more to them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And your husband's sitting next to you, and he can confirm a lot of these experiences, and he was there during a lot of it.
Yeah, yeah. There's, there's a lot of stuff that me and him have experienced together, and, things that he has experienced. Like I said, he heard wood knocks, years before we bought the place. And when he first started coming out here hunting, him and his brother, they would hear the knocks all the time. They'd be like, "What is that?" But, and then, of course, he's seen those tracks right at the beginning, and Bigfoot was never on his mind back then, He just couldn't explain what it was he was seeing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. So several people have heard the wood knocks. Do you think it's like a warning?
Yeah, I think that they communicate that way. What it means, I don't know if they're warning other people that there's somebody coming in, or letting people know, or letting the other ones know, hey, there's somebody coming around. Be quiet or something. That's what it makes me think, because I know, like, when I didn't hear a lot of knocks this summer, but the summers prior, it was like almost every time I'd be outside, you'd hear them. And I was, there was one that came from the hill about 700 yards away. I recorded it. That thing was loud. And then whenever Carrie was here, we decided that I would do like a pool scenario, because it seemed like every time I get in the pool, that's when stuff would start happening. That's what I told him. And I told him, I said, I'd be willing to get in there and just see if anything happens, And So I got in the pool and he told Paul, he said, go ahead and do what you usually would do, and Carrie was sitting up here in front of the house. The other guy was down there ground level. And they were both filming, you know, across the field. And I took the net and I, skimmed the pool. And as soon as I hit it on the side of the pool to knock the leaves out, across the power line over there, there was a tree. It went, it come crashing down to the ground. And Carrie, I looked up at him and his eyes were, huge. And he was like, oh my God. He looked at Paul was coming back up about that time. And he looked at Paul. He said, coincidence? He said, I don't think so. So they all took off over there. And Paul and Carrie went to the side of the power line where Paul thought that the tree fell at. And the other guy went to the other side. Well, as soon as they got over there was two knocks that come from the side that the other guy went. And and the way that hill is, it's a hill and then it has like a big valley in the middle of the hill. And it came from down in that valley. And when I say hill, these are, they're not mountains, but they're big hills. They're steep enough in areas that I've went up on. I literally have to grab a hold of stuff and help pull myself up, you know. And it was down in that valley. And Paul and Carrie was like, you know, they couldn't believe it. Because the knocks were loud. And the guy that went on the other side, he said it was so loud it sounded like a gunshot, But I mean, it wasn't a gunshot, but he just said that's how loud it was.
Yeah, that's
So,
interesting. You said this is the foothills of the Ozarks?
yes.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not too far away from you. Maybe I can come down someday and check it out for myself.
Well, which, one of Carrie Arnold's friends has kind of stepped in. He's been coming out and, like doing some investigating and he's put together 2 documentaries about it. But I mean, you'd be more than welcome to come out. I wouldn't care a bit in the world for you to come out. The thing about it is, he's kind of doing his own little thing, which now when he comes out, all he does is camp because he knows that we don't do knocks, we don't do whoops, we don't try to do anything, because we live here. I don't want to do anything to stir them up. And I know when Carrie was here, they had been out here and it was day 3 when everything really started, you know, getting crazy. That was the day that he heard all the howling or the calls, and I walked out and heard the whoops. That was the day the tree came down and the knocks, and then that night we saw the lights in the power line. So it was like the first 2 days, um, the first night we heard some things. The second night, the second day, we heard, a couple of knocks and now, and they went out, by themselves exploring as well. And because I remember him saying that he probably recorded at least 20 knocks while he was here. Um, but, it was, but that day 3, that was, very active that day. I think they was getting tired of them being here is what I think.
Yeah, very
So,
well could be. And do you have any other experiences that you'd like to share? Anything else that you can think of?
well, I mean, there's I can go on and on about stuff that has happened, but, like, you know, it would take a long time to get through everything, just, like the house, getting hit. And then my sister-in-law came and stayed with me when Paul went bear hunting in October, and we had some weird things. We heard whistling outside. She saw a bright light in the window. So, I mean, it's pretty, I ain't gonna say every day, but there's a lot that happens.
Yeah. Does a lot more seem to happen whenever your husband is gone?
Um, yeah. I mean, especially, You know, if I'm here by myself, which I don't stay the night out here by myself anymore. I can't do it. I tried whenever, because he goes on a bear hunting trip every year, and I just can't do it. And so his sister, her husband, works in another state. He's gone a lot, and so she comes out here and stays with me a lot, you know, or whenever he's gone. She's done that for the past 2 years. And in fact, last year when she came, she wanted me to take her deer hunting. She had never been deer hunting. Now, I was a little bit uneasy, you know, and I mean, she understands. I mean, she knows, she believes, you know, she's never seen one, but she believes 100%. And I said, well, I'll go ahead and take you. Well, we had knocks. She saw an orb that night. We was sitting out front, and she saw something shoot across the yard. You know, it was about 40 foot up in the air. She said, I just seen a light go right through there. And but you know, was sitting in the stand and heard knocks. And she's like, what's that? I said, that's a knock. She said, oh my God. You know, and it was close, you know. So and then, like I said, this past October, we heard the whistling, and we could hear it from inside the house, whistling outside at nighttime. And then I heard a weird sound to the right side of the house. It was like something going, hoo, 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 but it wasn't an owl. I mean, it was like that, hoo, hoo, hoo. And my cat took off running over there, you know, like looking. And I got up and looked out the window, and I have security cameras. And and I asked her, or she said, oh, she said, I think it was a cat. She said, I just seen your security camera go off, and I didn't think nothing about it, but then my phone didn't ding. And so I looked on my phone. I said, my security camera didn't go off. She said, well, I just saw a big bright light in that window. And I said, my security camera does a flashing light. It doesn't do a bright light. She said, and I showed her, I turned the light on. She said, no, this was like a big bright light right in the window. I said, well, it was not my camera. She said, well, then what did I see? I said, I have no clue. But she said it lit up the whole window. But, you know, it's just crazy stuff like this quite often.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
You know, like I said, I could sit here and go on and on. I know there's things I'm leaving out, but, you know, it's just fairly active, you know, and I always tell them, you know, people might think this is crazy, but, you know, I'll sometimes when I walk outside, especially if I feel uneasy, I just say, look, y'all back off, and I just start praying. And, you know, it makes me feel better, you know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And Pamela, I really appreciate you for reaching out to me and sharing these encounters on Sasquatch Theory. It really means a lot.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're very welcome, and I'm, you know, and I'm glad to do it. I think it's important people know, and, you know, and I know there's people out there that's probably just like me, that have this same stuff going on, you know, and, you know, and if they listen to you, and, you know, maybe it'll help somebody, you know, that's why I do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if Mark ever needs a hand out there, tell him to reach out to me, and I'll be glad to join him. Or if you just need another researcher to come out there, let me know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Alrighty. I sure will.
Okay. Well, I think that pretty well wraps everything up. And yeah, you did an amazing job, and you certainly got a lot of stuff going on out there. So just make sure you keep your eyes peeled, and, you know, just watch out, because you never know what these things are capable of.
Oh, I know. Oh, believe me. My head's always on a swivel.
Yeah, it has to be, because you just don't know what else could be out there, and you just got to be mindful.
Yeah. Believe me, I am.
Well, good. Yeah. And if anything else happens in the future, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd certainly like to hear about it.
Okay. All righty. I sure will, Miguel.
Okay. Well, you and Paul have an excellent night, and thank you again for sharing all that with me.
Okay. Well, you're welcome, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reach out if you need anything, okay?
Okay, I sure will.
All right. You have a good night.
All right, you too.
Bye. All right, Pam, thank you very much for sharing your encounters and experiences with me here on the channel, and they certainly sound terrifying. The Ozarks is a mysterious place, and there are a lot of strange cryptid creatures that live within its forest. I do believe the Native Americans knew a lot about this activity, and they were very aware of these creatures. A lot of people have written off the Native Americans and tossed them aside, but they knew what was going on out there, and they try to warn us. I think Christianity is a good guide to understand the world around you, but there are a lot of things that are being kept a secret, and I think if we knew more about what was going on, we could better defend ourselves and possibly understand the true nature of these creatures. It would certainly be interesting to go out there and research the property, but I have so many areas around here that I need to keep up with, and it's just difficult to maintain too many research areas. I would like to find an active Bigfoot area in my county or somewhere close by, and I think that would be more ideal for the research that I'm trying to conduct, and I think I'd be able to get out there a lot more frequently and keep up with the area. I wish the Sasquatch would show back up to my property, and that would be the best opportunity. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for listening and tuning in today. If you guys can, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I appreciate everyone for listening. Thank you, and take care.